huge country started building a paradise on earth, an affluent society called communism. The mastermind of the revolution, Vladimir Lenin, and his cohorts from the Bolshevik Party firmly believed that it was possible to build socialism in one separate country, and then, in several decades, communism. And despite the tremendous difficulties, they embarked upon the road of their majestic plans. The prominent English science fiction writer, Herbert George Wells, after his talk with Lenin, called him the Kremlin Dreamer. The poverty-stricken and devastated Russia began to sink into a utopian euphoria. The country swayed from one fantastic project to another in expectation of the miracle. Naturally, the first dream of hungry people is food. At first, it was decided that abundance could be achieved with the help of electricity. And so, power transmission lines stretched across the fields. The idea was to cultivate millions of hectares of fields with the help of electric plows. The experimental model really did perform wonderfully, and the people were in a remarkable mood. On such an occasion, it would not be a sin to celebrate a grand holiday. Moreover, the leader, Comrade Lenin, said, "Communism is Soviet power plus total electrification of the whole country." Regretfully, nothing came of the electric tractors and electric plows. And then especially organized women's battalions of tractor drivers were sent into the battle for the harvest. The new leader, Comrade Stalin, as always the genius, decided to send agricultural equipment to the backward peoples in Central Asia. The appearance of tractors there amazed the local inhabitants, for they had never seen anything but donkeys and camels in the fields up till then. That fantastic machine seemed to carry them into the fairy tale world of 1,001 Nights. Since the peasants, who had been forced into collective farms, were unable to feed the country, airplanes began to circle the farm fields. "Sowing from aircraft is a revolution in agriculture," proclaimed the slogan. But after the seeds sown this way failed to sprout, the experiment was forgotten.
Представь себе, вон там идет трактор.
For many decades, the dream about fantastic machinery, which, like in a fairy tale, would plow, sow, and harvest by itself, gave the Soviet people no peace of mind. This is the way young peasants, heroes in one of the popular Soviet films, visualized their work in the fields in the communist future, which was supposed to be just around the corner. But since, as before, there was still not enough food, they began to wait for a miracle from biology and agronomy. Demand immediately gave rise to supply, and the most zealous specialists promised to evolve bread growing on trees, watermelons the size of a house, and cows giving birth to 5 and even 10 calves at once. For example, academician Tsitsin evolved a sort of wheat that was supposed to grow as a shrub and yield a bumper crop for several years running. Where is that remarkable perennial Bishi wheat today? The provincial selectionist, Michurin, came up with a whole multitude of new sorts of fruits and berries. He and his followers crossed everything that came under hand, sincerely believing that they could give the hybrids any properties. They were especially captivated by the idea of cultivating southern, warm-loving crops in freezing Siberia and beyond the Arctic Circle, where fragrant orchards and vineyards were supposed to blossom. It was probably proceeding from Michurin's principle by which the natural properties of an organism are changed by altering the environmental conditions that tens of thousands of Jewish families were sent into the far eastern taiga. It was there, in the uninhabited expanses near the border with China, that these people were to acquire a second homeland, a new communistic Israel. However, time demonstrated that vineyards and Jews still prefer a warm climate. However, let's return to Maturin. By the end of his life, his orchard became a place of pilgrimage for many of Maturin's followers from all parts of the country. The selectionist died at the peak of his glory. There is quite a black joke that the cause of his death was a fall from a huge hybrid strawberry he had grown. For many long years, Maturin was in the ranks of communist saints. Trofim Lysenko, Stalin's pet and one of the most notorious charlatans in science, proclaimed himself Maturin's successor. That People's Academician branded genetics a sellout slut of imperialism and dispatched his opponents to prisons and labor camps. He was able to charm the new party leader, Nikita Khrushchev, promising him hitherto unseen harvests. This sequence from a cartoon lauds corn to the skies, for it was to be that very same magic and miraculous thing which Nikita Khrushchev thought would finally resolve the food problem. This warm-loving crop, in the best of Maturin's traditions, was to have been planted throughout the vast expanses of the Soviet Union, from southern deserts to the Arctic Ocean. It was claimed that corn had truly mystical qualities. At last, the population would have as much bread, meat, poultry, and other food products as they needed. However, it was at the height of the corn boom that the country for the first time began purchasing grain from the West. Although all the experiments in agriculture failed miserably, the Soviet leadership was not in the least dismayed. In response, it created a new myth. There was that beautiful myth about a collective farm where things were simply wonderful. For instance, as depicted in the famous film of Stalin's epoch, the Kuban Cossacks. Moreover, the impact of the propaganda machine was so great that millions of poverty-stricken and half-starved peasants throughout the country thought that their own collective farm, a pitiful war-torn collective farm, was the exception, and that somewhere in a far-off village there is the ideal life, with the ideal farm, where people work and live as if in a general festive holiday. Later, it became known that during the shooting of that film, the food products were drenched in kerosene, so that the local hungry peasants participating in mass scenes would not eat them. In the meantime, In the quiet of laboratories, scientists work on tirelessly because the Communist Party was prodding them to make great discoveries. In a situation when everyone was waiting for a miracle to happen, this opened up great a field for activity by all sorts of fantastic projectionists and reckless adventurers. One scientist proposed holding musical concerts for poultry. According to his observations, the poultry swiftly gained in weight when listening to specific melodies. And so, it was in this musical manner that they planned to fully supply the whole country with poultry meat, eggs, and related products. One of the founders of scientific Marxism, Friedrich Engels, discovered that manual labor transformed a monkey into a man. And so, a group of Soviet scholars decided to teach a monkey to work, and in this way, to humanize it, at least partially. This opened up a wonderful prospect for making use of the evolved hybrid for building socialism. These creatures could do all the heaviest and dirtiest work. In fact, certain things seem to be panning out along that road. However, in spite of the stubbornness of the researchers, progress, as we can see, came only with great effort. Theory did not lag behind practice. The old Bolshevik and loyal Leninist, academician Lepeshinskaya, in the matter of charlatanism and hoaxes, could compete with Lysenko himself. By a series of sensational experiments, she proved spontaneous emergence of cells from a biological mass was possible, and that now, according to the will of the Communist Party, it was possible to evolve any kind of living creatures. Again, prospects that lay beyond the horizon. But in reality, the academicians simply had changed the places of the photographs from the beginning and the end of the experiments. The sensational discovery simply astounded the public. In a shower of decorations, Lepeshinskaya died at the zenith of glory. After her death, live cells never did spontaneously emerge. The might of the Communist Party looked really impressive when, on its orders, seas were connected and rivers were made to flow in another direction. With great inspiration, the Muslim peoples of Central Asia, following the orders of the greatest leader Stalin, canals from the series of the so-called the great construction projects of communism were built.